25-30, 35-40, 45-50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. Oh, the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone.
Four-man Alabama rush. Got him. Oh, no, they didn't. Oh, my gracious. Yep. How about that?
Ohio State fans, how you feeling? You just won the national championship. 34-23, the Ohio State Buckeyes beat the Notre Dame Fighting Irish and claim their first national championship in a decade. Ryan Day has a championship. Ohio State is back on top. We've got so much to talk about as we wrap up year 3 of the podcast here on the Three Technique, a college football podcast at the intersection of the X's and O's and the Jimmies and the Joes. I'm Mitch Mason, Trey Reeves, Garrett Turney. Fellas, looked like it was going to be a blowout there for a little bit. We got into the third quarter. Ohio State's up 24, and then the Fighting Irish roar back, and there's so many directions that we can go with this. But first and foremost, I think we got a fantastic national championship game once all of the dust had settled.
Yeah, we joked in our group text that we thought we could start this one a little bit early. I think Ohio State was up, 31-7, was it? Or 28-7? So we thought that this was going to be a laugher runaway. I know that was most of the discourse online, but credit Notre Dame for coming back and making this one fully in doubt right down to the final second. I mean, if that field goal goes just a few inches to the right there at the end, it's a completely different conversation that we're having right now with a potential Notre Dame drive in the final seconds to tie it. But fantastic game, fantastic finish to a great electric college football postseason. And all I can say is I'm sad it's over. It was a fun run for this last month. It dragged on for a little bit longer than I expected, but really fun run.
Yeah, it's got to be extra fun for, again, obviously everybody on the Ohio State side. Congratulations to all of them. You know, Ryan Day definitely needed this. I think coming out of the Michigan game, for all of us to be saying, does he have to win the national championship to save his job? Well, doesn't matter if that's true or not. Job secured. He's got a lot of goodwill and a lot of good graces there. And I was watching his little presser right after this, his little, on the field interview. I don't know if y'all had the volume on for that. Was he wondering about the whereabouts of Lou Holtz? I don't know if that was something that was happening. It probably feels really sweet to be Ryan Day right now. It probably feels fantastic, and it's got to be great to be a Buckeye right now. It's a fun time, and congrats to all our Buckeye mutuals and everybody out there like that. That's got to be fun, and I hope that y'all are enjoying this.
Yeah, I know I want to shout out Jake from the Walk On Red Shirts. He put out a touching tweet that this was the first year watching Buckeye football without his dad, and to get to be there in person, to watch a national championship, watch his team secure a victory, I'm sure that's really special. So, Jake, enjoy the heck out of it, my friend, and we'll definitely talk to you soon. I know this one's really, really special. So much to talk about. I think the first place that naturally comes to my mind is Ryan Day. I mean, that's going to be a big storyline that's going to be on SportsCenter and all the talking points all through the offseason. He finally gets over the hump. He's able to secure that national championship. He came dangerously close to wasting millions of dollars that was poured into this roster to keep guys back from the NFL draft and bring in key transfers like Caleb Downs, Quinshon Judkins, who had 3 touchdowns tonight. I mean, the trifecta for Quinshon, right? And yet he's able to finally climb the mountain after the lowest of lows, losing to Michigan again. I tweeted this out in response to another tweet. They lash Tennessee. Everyone's saying it's going to be Neyland North up there in the shoe. They destroy Tennessee. They take down the only undefeated team in the country, the most complete team by a lot of metrics, in the Oregon Ducks. They stifle Texas. And then for 2.5 quarters, they completely mauled Notre Dame's defense, one of the best defenses in the country, and their defense completely eliminated Jeremiah Love. At one point, Love had 3 carries for 1 yard, and that was all the offense that he had been able to muster. Ohio State climbs the mountain, and I think that's for sure the first place that anybody talking about this national championship has to start. You have to give Ryan Day his flowers.
And what's crazy to me, Mitch, is I was thinking about this as I was just kind of trying to gather the storylines to talk about the show. Think about all the quarterbacks that Ryan Day has had come through there.
Good
and it's Will Howard that gets it done for him, right? Obviously, the rest of the roster was built to a T, and they were getting whoever they wanted out of the transfer portal and out of the recruiting ranks. But Will Howard is the guy that gets it done at the quarterback position for him, not CJ Stroud, not all these other guys that they've had come through there, right? It's Will Howard out of the transfer portal from Kansas State in his 1 year in Columbus, gets it done and brings home the national championship. I think it's awesome. First of all, like I think that's awesome that that's a little subtext here, but yeah, credit to Ryan Day for getting it done, for silencing the doubters. And when his back was up against the wall, when tons of people were picking him to lose in the first round coming off of that Michigan game, reels off 4 straight victories and does what no other coach has been able to do up to this point, becoming the first coach to win a 12-team playoff. It's something that no one will ever be able to take away from him, and it's going to get him a lot of goodwill up in Columbus for years to come.
I agree. I think he's certainly bought himself a little job security. I think a lot of Buckeye fans are happy to eat crow after they're going to be celebrating tonight. You know, this game, it could have taken so many different paths off the rip, because Notre Dame has a 18 play, 9-minute, 45-second drive. Riley Leonard, quarterback for the Irish, runs the ball 9 times himself. I mean, everywhere, every Twitter account out there was tweeting the all red college football 25 player graphic, because Leonard was just getting beat up. And you could see that first drive, like Notre Dame's offense exuded all the energy. It was 60 minutes of grit put into one drive, and it was fantastic. But I think we all kind of wondered, like, okay, they can't do this again, right? And there were a lot of comments like, okay, if Notre Dame is going to keep doing this, or if they're relying on this, like Ohio State's going to win and they're going to run away. And that's really what we saw for the first 2.5 quarters, because after that first drive, Ohio State marches down, they score a touchdown, and then the defense starts to bow up, right? And that was something that we talked about in all the preview episodes, was Riley Leonard can't really beat you with his arm. So Notre Dame had to find unique ways, creative ways to get the running game going, and they just weren't really able to do that. But credit Notre Dame for sticking with it, and instead of packing it up, similar to that Penn State game, they found something in that third quarter. And I think while Ohio State obviously is going to get all the accolades and they're the national champions and they're going to get to hang a banner, and there are going to be stories about, Notre Dame's got to join a conference and they didn't, they're going to come up short again. I was really proud of the way that Notre Dame continued to fight, outmatched, outgunned, out-athleted, and made this a game down to the very end.
Well, and I don't know why people would say Notre Dame needs to join a conference at this point. They just played in the national championship game, and I'm noticing the SEC didn't do that, and the Big 12 didn't do that, and the ACC didn't do that. So I don't know what good that's doing for those other 3 conferences being in a conference. It certainly didn't help any of them get here. But Notre Dame got here, and look, they got beat. And I think watching it, just like if you're just watching any point in the game, opening up your eyes and watching the 2 teams, I think it was pretty obvious that Ohio State had the better athletes and they were the better team overall. But they didn't go away, right? Notre Dame didn't go away. They didn't, kind of fade away from the pressure. They stood up and they kind of came back and made it close. And you got to give them some credit for that. It's close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades, so we don't really care that much. But they did come back and make it close. They should be able to hold their heads high at the effort that they ended up giving. There's going to be a lot of Fighting Irish fans who are going to question things and wonder, where the heck was that in the second quarter and where the heck was that earlier in the third quarter? Like, what happened? Why couldn't we do more of that when they turned it up? But, yeah, you got to give them the credit. They hung in there and they did pretty well. And I think that does go to credit Marcus Freeman and his guys. He was doing a really good job, kind of like what I said in the preview, just motivating his guys and getting the most out of them. Tonight, they weren't the better team. Tonight, they were outclassed. They were clearly just not better across the board. The Jimmies and Joes were not better for them, but they got everything out of their team, and they ended up putting up a heck of a fight, and I think you got to give them some credit for that.
I think you do. And, we talk about Ryan Day getting over the hump Marcus Freeman is probably going to catch a lot of flack for some of the decisions that were made in this game. Again, if you watch this along on Twitter, you saw it in real time. 2 head-scratching decisions, guys, that have been hotly debated so far tonight. Number 1, the fake punt. Steve Angeli, I don't know if he really fooled anybody. It looked like Ohio State was pretty alert that that was not the normal up back waiting to take the snap, but Steve Angeli takes a snap on a 4th down, throws a pass to Jordan Faison, and it goes right through his hands. And so Ohio State gets the ball in plus territory. The second one, though, is certainly going to be the most infamous decision that comes out of this national championship. 4th and goal from, what, the 5-yard line, right? And
it was more like the 7 or 8. It was a little longer than that.
Marcus Freeman, down 2 scores, down 16, decides, nope, we're going to kick the field goal here instead of going for it and trying to make this a 1-score game. Mitch Jeter doinks it off the upright. And after it felt like Notre Dame, they had just forced a fumble. They had just marched down. It felt like Notre Dame was right back in this, that you could smell a comeback. And then a field goal attempt with the national championship on the line from inside the 10-yard line ends up being one of the big things that holds Notre Dame back from coming all the way back. What did y'all think about that decision in real time? And is there any way that you could kind of justify it a couple of minutes and moments afterwards?
I mean, you could tell the broadcast was doing their best to justify try to give a little bit of credence to that decision, talking about the Ohio State defense bowing up in the red zone, which, to be fair, they have done all season long. We've highlighted that all playoff long, but there's just no excuse for me when you're down 2 scores to kick a field goal to still be down 2 scores with about 8 minutes to go. It just took all the air out of that sideline. It felt like it completely deflated that sideline. Like you said, Mitch, they had all the momentum going in their direction. And you hate to make it boil down to 1 or 2 plays because they needed a touchdown and a 2-point conversion there. But it really, I'd love to see the win probability statistics of kicking a field goal versus just turning the football over right there. Because I'm pretty sure it's not going to be very different. It's not drastically increasing your chances to kick the field goal versus getting the turnover. Maybe that's already out there on social media. Somebody can point us in that direction. But yeah, I can't defend that. I'm never going to defend a coach trying to kick a field goal to stay down 2 scores that late in the game. It was really hard to defend in the moment. I'm struggling to find defense for it and scraping the bottom of the barrel, honestly.
This is probably one of those things where the numbers actually probably back it up a little bit, because if you think about what they need a touchdown and a 2-point followed by a touchdown and a 2-point. And if any of those things go wrong, if they just don't get a touchdown and a 2-point on the 2 consecutive drives, they need the 3rd scoring drive anyways. So they kind of needed the field goal, so to speak, anyways. Plus that turns into your go-ahead score later on if you end up getting those 2 more drives with the touchdowns. But the point there is, and the point that I'd make is, there's probably some kind of model somewhere in the analytics that tells you it's kind of a good decision. But I think what we're all seeing and what most of college football agrees with is just that doesn't really matter. The analytics can get in the way sometimes. Like, you're down 2 scores. It's the national championship game. There's like 10 minutes left. You got to go. Like, it's time to do this. You don't know how many more possessions you're going to get. You don't know if they're going to come down and score again. You got to push. You got to find a way to make this thing work. And it's going to be easy to second guess, but I'm sure there was some person up in the booth who said, hey, actually, there's like a 10-point swing if we kick the field goal here, so let's do it, something. And then obviously didn't work out for him. I'd have been curious to see how people would have felt about it if they did come down the field and then, score again and convert on one of those drives and score a touchdown, because that could have ended up making the difference for him. People would have said, oh, that's genius to go back and do that at the time. I don't know. I'm kind of spitballing. Obviously, it doesn't matter, and it's kind of just ifs, ands, and buts, but it might have made sense numbers-wise. Else, I don't know why they would have done it in the first place. It just isn't a football move.
I found a tweet with the numbers if you guys are interested.
Yeah,
Sure.
Big A Analytics said go, right?
I think so. And I'm not sure the validity of this. The graphic. This is Henry Williams on Twitter. Not even sure if that's a big account or not, but shout out Henry. Yeah, 498 followers. So whatever. But it's based on Ben Baldwin's NFL fourth down model, using some college football win probability models. So take this for whatever it's worth. My source is Twitter, but field goal attempt, the win percentage is 3%. Go for it, it's 2%. But if you succeed, the field goal takes you from 3% chance to win to 3% chance to win. If you succeed with the touchdown, it goes from 2% to 7%. So still a long shot, but much more beneficial if you're successful.
Well, and it felt like, and Henry, sure, you're great out there. I also saw it from much bigger accounts, Game on Paper, a couple others that said the analytics decision, quote unquote, was to go for it. I think if you kick the field goal and make the field goal, what does that really do for your sideline? Like, you're still down 2 scores, right? You still got to get the ball back twice, and the offense has to do something that they haven't done all game. If you're able to punch it in and get a touchdown, then all of a sudden you've got all the momentum on your side. The belief is back in that huddle. And the other thing that I thought of that I feel like all too often we kind of forget about going for it down on the goal line. If all of a sudden the opposing offense is working in a phone booth, we've seen countless times a bad snap, a busted, run protection, what have you. Notre Dame did it to Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, right? RJ Oben tears around that edge, forces a strip sack. It was a little bit farther out, not exactly on the 5-yard line, but the point still stands. Like, it's not a failed possession. It's not just all over if suddenly you don't get that. So,
and your kicking has been an adventure all year long.
Yes, Mitch
it
Jeter
was not a guaranteed stone cold lock field goal.
Sure,
Mitch Jeter has been broken, refurbished, worked for a little bit, was on warranty. The warranty expired, and then he broke again. So
he got recalled somewhere in there.
Just an adventure for those in South Bend.
And just to be clear, I wasn't trying to defend the choice to kick because I don't think it's a good move. I just think somewhere in there's probably like a guy up in the booth somewhere that said, hey, I did my numbers and here it is. But that's like a broader point on analytics and sports. So sometimes you just got to read the room, read the moment and say, hey, like if this was a regular season game, maybe I'm okay with it. If this is like first round playoff, maybe I could justify it, but you're in the national championship game. There's nothing else next week. It's time to go.
Yeah. Guys, let's talk about the quarterbacks here, because I think this is an interesting discussion when you look at the box score, right? Will Howard, very efficient, 17 of 21, 231 yards, 2 touchdowns. Riley Leonard, 21 of 30 for 238 and 2 touchdowns. Did anybody feel like Leonard was averaging 8 yards of completion at any point during that game?
A lot of that came in that last touchdown drive that they had. I think he had something like 150 yards going into that. I think the stat came up on the TV. He was not crushing it up until there were a couple of big time Jaden Greathouse catches, which, by the way, there's a good chance that Greathouse is like number 1 tampered with player in the portal this there's no way he's not going to be getting some calls even tonight or tomorrow about like, hey, we saw that and we will throw you the ball more than, what is it? He had 5 catches in this game for 111. Grant you, that's pretty good. But there's probably some people like, we'll throw it to you 8 or 9 times a game if you want to come play for us. And so, he might be the number 1 tampered with player. But no, I think a lot of those numbers were kind of padded towards the end when, Ohio State's kind of still playing, but maybe playing a little bit softer because they're just trying to run some clock and, stuff like that. He played fine. It wasn't obviously like an amazing game for Riley Leonard, but he played fine. He just fine doesn't win national championships.
Well, they stopped the run too, right? I mean, Leonard, after that first drive where he had 9 carries, he carries the ball 8 more times, ends up with 40 yards. That's just 2.4 a carry for 1 touchdown. And they crucially held him to the longest rush of his night was just 8 yards. Leonard never once got loose. He never once picked up a big third down that he wasn't supposed to. Ohio State really bottled them up. And I thought that defensive line came to play. We talked about Notre Dame's offense. They got Charles Jagusaw back at left tackle. He had played right guard in the semifinal game in the Orange Bowl against Penn State after they suffered another injury along the line. Then he slid back out to left tackle. Notre Dame's offensive line did absolutely everything they could to propel this team forward, to keep the offense on the ground and pound. And tonight they just ran into a better matchup, right? Ohio State's defensive line was full of veterans and full of explosiveness, and the better unit won. And, Trey, that goes back to our whole philosophy really this year has been that defense is going to win championships. We were talking about Ohio State's defense winning a national championship 1 year ago. Following last year's national championship game, you brought up, and I tweeted this clip out, you brought up the early odds for the 2024 national championship, and we discussed why Ohio State should be the favorite because of what their defense could do.
And it was the defense that spurned that 31-0 run. It was some really nice sustained drives by the offense, obviously, to put the points on the board. But after that first drive, it was all the Ohio State defense. It was the story of this game until the offense turned the ball over and kind of made things dicey for them there at the end. But yeah, it's something that we've been saying all year long. The offense is getting all the headlines during this college football playoff run for Ohio State. But it's the defense that's really set them apart. That Jim Knowles scheme has just caused every single team that's played against it trouble. And the same thing was the story tonight. The Ohio State defense was the story of this game, making big plays when they needed to and sealing the deal and making this the point that it was remotely close was a just furious comeback effort from Notre Dame.
Yeah. A couple other flowers to give to Ohio State. And then Trey, I believe you might be letting a special guest into the room here in a few minutes. Quinshon Judkins leads the Buckeyes, 11 carries, 100 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had 1 receiving as well. Jeremiah Smith, who ices that game away with an awesome reception down the sideline. Also, again, just kind of circling back, shout out to Will Howard for that throw. All year, he's struggled with pressure. All year, when someone gets a hand in his face, he gets happy feet, and suddenly he's throwing from his back pocket. He threw that ball to Jeremiah Smith like he knew the national championship was on the line. He stepped up, and he made a Sunday throw. And Christian Gray, man, I feel bad for him. He's going to get tweeted at and complained at for the cushion that he gave Jeremiah Smith. I think that's just going back to coaching. They put him in a one-on-one situation to the wide side of the field with maybe the most electric wide receiver in college football. Like, I don't know that there's a man on the planet that's successfully guarding Jeremiah Smith in that scenario. But Smith, 5 catches, 88 yards, and a touchdown. The Buckeyes stars came to play on offense, and that was obviously what really poured gasoline on the fire early as they made that 31-0 run after giving up the initial score. It looked like Chip Kelly had fully dissected that defense. And I thought the thing that stood out to me that maybe Notre Dame had not had to deal with in the previous few weeks was when you're not able to contain a running quarterback, and they were not able to contain Will Howard at all times, suddenly that's where man defense becomes really leaky. Because if you don't have someone who can just step up out of their zone and go get the quarterback, then suddenly you're needing someone to come off an island, right? In one of the Will Howard touchdown passes, I think to it might have been to Jeremiah Smith, was just a defender completely pulling off of him, leaving the middle of the end zone wide open, and Will Howard's able to step up and make that throw. For me, that was the difference. Notre Dame's man-to-man coverage was fine throughout much of the night, but when Howard was able to get mobile, when he was able to break, contain, and make those defenders think about something else than just him throwing the football, that was where Ohio State broke the game open for me.
Well, and, Mitch, kind of to that point, it was really a couple of great defensive efforts. Like, most of the night, Notre Dame was playing great defense. Problem is there were just a couple of gashes, and that's what cost you in these games, right? When you have 2 great defenses, you have 2 offenses that over the course of the game are kind of struggling and not really as electric as they were used to. It's going to be the big play that gets you, and ultimately Notre Dame just had some bad fits. Like the fit when they had Quinshon rip off that 70-yarder, like that was bad, right? It wasn't that Quinshon's just a beast, but he is, but it's not just that. It's that, hey, if you're in a bad spot, you're not ripping off 70 in college because you're just that much better than everybody else. It's because the defense did something wrong. It's because the defense didn't fit the run the way they needed to. And there you go. And so, you look at that. You were talking, Mitch, about that big catch at the end of the game. Look, you could talk about the throw. Good job. He hung in there. Let's not pretend like that was into a tight window. Let's not pretend like that was an amazing catch. Jeremiah Smith cooked him in that route. Like, it was just one-on-one, and he was a stud receiver. He just cooked him. He just beat the corner. That's all that it really came down to, is if you have several yards on the guy that's supposed to be covering you, you don't have to make that good of a throw, it turns out. Which, like, and look, it's easy to say that here when I'm not having, several guys rushing me and having to sit in there and take a hit. But again, it's when you have that good of a player that you can cook a guy on your route, that's going to help you, right? And so it's those little things through the game where you make that one mistake and the other side is going to make you pay for it, right? Whereas Ohio State as a whole, they didn't really make those mistakes. Everything Notre Dame got was extremely earned, and they kind of had to labor for the whole night. Like, even that, Jaden Greathouse touchdown catch, that was cool, but that was also a heck of a catch. It was tight window, guy draped on him, had to kind of reach up there with the single paw to pull it in. Like, it was a tough catch, and you got to give him his credit because he made it, but it was a tough catch. Those moments weren't really there for Notre Dame over the course of the night as much as they were for Ohio State, and Ohio State made him pay.
To y'all's point about the big plays too, if I asked you guys who won time of possession without looking at the stats, who would you think won time of possession?
I would guess Notre Dame just because of that opening drive.
Ohio State
I would guess Ohio State because Notre Dame's offense went cold for 2 quarters basically after that.
Yeah, after holding the ball for 9.5 minutes to start the game, Ohio State still won time of possession by 5 whole minutes.
That's wild.
They were 9 of 12 on third down. They
That's
really did a great job of staying on the field. It wasn't the big plays necessarily that was keeping it going. Notre Dame, to their credit, they were 5 of 12 on third down, but 3 of 4 converting fourth downs. So it wasn't the big plays that were murdering Notre Dame. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts at points, and Will Howard making really good decisions. That last play, obviously Jeremiah Smith is making a big baller play. Like, he is the best receiver in the country at this point. I don't think there's really much debating about that. Obviously, Ryan Williams would have something to say about that at Alabama, but I think that play call on the defensive side really gave me vibes of Arizona State in the Peach Bowl a couple weeks before. Like, it wasn't the same cover zero that we saw an all-out blitz, but man, like, why are we calling that in that situation? Why are we putting the kid in a tough spot?
It felt really, really desperate. It felt just like, we need to get to the quarterback, and if we don't, it's over.
PSA for all defensive coordinators in high leverage situations next season, go ahead and leave the free safety out there. Right?
Yeah, don't call engage aid, please. It's not that good.
Shade him over the top of that number 1 wide receiver. Well, we've got much more to talk about. I've got state of college football questions for you guys, but if you have been listening to the show for any length of time, and there are many of you that have been with us for all 3 seasons, you will know that we have an Ohio State superfan who listens. Trey, please introduce our newest national champion.
He's taken a lot of flack, guys, from his bitter rivals in the last few years, but Joe from Longview is here to talk some sense and just gloat for a little bit, I think.
Thanks for having me, boys.
What's up,
How's
Joe?
it feel? National champions, to go from November 30th, where the world was ending, with yet another loss to the Michigan Wolverines, to where you're sitting right now. How does it feel?
Well, first I want to thank Mitch for believing in us this whole time.
11-0, baby. Come on.
He picked him right. He believed in us. Turney switching his pick to Notre Dame, that wasn't a smart move. No, well, the funny thing was I was thinking about my emotions before the Tennessee game. And, there was a day or two where I'm like, I think we need to fire Day, and I think we need to hire Mike Vrabel. Like, I was with much of the fan base, and he proved everybody wrong. The whole team proved everybody wrong. And it's cool. I remember sitting in my living room in college, during the 2014 national title. So it's a cool feeling. It's been a long time coming, and I will take this over the abysmal Michigan performances over the last couple of years. I will admit that.
Would you take 5 more losses in a row to Michigan if it meant that you got 2 more national titles?
Yeah, I wonder how many. It's so fun. Now I feel like the heat's going to be off day for a while, which rightfully so. It should be. Like, give the man a break. But yeah, I don't even know about all that. But the crazy thing is, you know, you guys love your boy Ross Bjork. He kind of his PSA to the fan base of like, I believe in our coach, kind of, I don't know if that did anything, but at least he saw something, you know, to keep these guys together. And man, it was just, I don't like how close that game got. I don't know why Notre Dame kicked it and doinked it off the uprights that had the momentum. But I'm happy that we have Jeremiah Smith. So
what dimension of existential dread would you have gone to had Notre Dame gone for it and scored on that 4th and goal from the 9?
Well, I was thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, they score and like, let's just say this game gets tied. I'm like, I'm just trying to put myself in Ryan Day's shoes of like, oh, just poor guy, please just get to the end of this game for this man. It was that was a gutsy 3rd and 11 just bomb though. I don't understand what Will Howard was doing on those runs. I don't know what the play calling was there, but yeah, it's kind of hard to put into words all this stuff. It's crazy.
The
That's
words in our text messages with each other were not very confident. I'll just say that.
That's a good point. That throw completely bailed out what we all thought was a terrible play calling sequence from the Buckeyes offense.
Well, and I said that in the text thread. I was like, guys, if he didn't hit that throw, we're now questioning play calling, because not only is it that, now you didn't make him burn another timeout. You got 2 minutes plus the 2-minute warning, plus 1 more timeout, and you're going to give him the ball back to tie it. And that's where it's, you know, it goes to show, like, sometimes it's just having some dogs back there who can get it done, right? Sometimes it's just, I'm going to look over, I'm going to see that my guy is, you know, best receiver probably in college football right now. And I'm going to look at him and say, he's got one-on-one. Yeah, he's going to be open. I'm just going to take a couple steps back, watch him beat the guy, cook him on the route, and I'm just going to chuck it up there. He's going to go get it, right? It's sometimes it's just having good players bails you out as a play caller. And you know, if the corner played better coverage and he knocks it down, we're all going to sit there and go, what are you thinking? Why wouldn't you run it? You got to make him burn that last time out, right? And didn't matter. They got bailed out. They had good players.
It's crazy too. Like, I was thinking about just like how many seniors are on this team, and then obviously they brought in the transfers and stuff to help. But I wonder if you see less and less of that going forward. Like you saw with Michigan last year, like they went all in on that year. You see it this year with Ohio State. You wonder if like we're going to still see that so much with all the transfer portal stuff. I don't know. I bet the best cultures are the ones that are going to try to keep their guys longer, you know?
Well, and that's something that that Chris and Kirk made a point of in the pregame show, actually talking about the quarterback specifically. They talked about the roster makeup as a whole, but specifically with quarterback, they were saying if you do go into the transfer portal, like Will Howard was not at the top of every team's wish list when he went in. Was he a popular quarterback? Of course he was. Was Riley Leonard at the top of every team's wish list when he went into the portal? No. But where they landed ended up being cultural fits and scheme fits, not just, hey, we want this kid because of his star potential or because we know he's a winner, right? And there's always going to be plenty of that, but it felt like Howard and Leonard respectively ended up in amazing fits, and I think that is something that's important to note as Ohio State gets to hoist a banner here. Joe, we'll get you out of here on this. You know, we talk about winning championships and we cover football all season long. But at the end of the day, we're all fans, right? And we do this because we love the game. As a true fan of Ohio State, like, can you can you kind of describe what tomorrow is going to be like, waking up as a national champion?
Oh, it's definitely gonna feel good. I mean, it's the exact opposite of how I felt at the end of November. Just the sheer just dread that you had. I remember on the debate. I did retire from the debate stage. I think that's for the best of the team. But I remember I told Turney, I said the teams that are going to make the longest runs in this playoff are the deepest teams, the teams that have the most depth. And I think you saw that. There was a lot of teams that were banged up going through the playoffs. And it seemed like Ohio State figured out the line situation in the Tennessee game and then stayed healthy throughout the whole rest of the time. So I'm just proud. I'm proud that it's been cool just to watch the story of this team and just, all the off the field stuff too, just their faith journeys and just to be able to see them just overcome all the adversity. And like it would have just been the biggest downer if they lost in the finals. So I don't know. It's exciting. I'm pumped. And when A&M gets one of these days, I'll come on and celebrate with you guys too. So
don't hold your breath. We may not still be podcasting then. I don't know if podcasts will still be a thing whenever A&M
you guys
finally
will have multiple. You'll have multiple kids, and you just be like, are we still doing this?
Yeah, we might have some grandkids as well. I don't know.
Hey, we toast to that hopefully eventual day. Joe, appreciate you coming on, spending a few minutes. Again, appreciate all your support of our show, and yeah, man, enjoy it. You're a national champ.
Hey, Teddy, enjoy the ReliaQuest Bowl. We'll see you guys.
Joe from Longview,
The parting
top
shots.
row. My goodness.
There's no way he's really done with the debate stage. Not after that. Come on.
I legitimately think he thinks that he has cursed the Buckeyes in the big game by
There's a
going on
chance.
this show.
There's a real
So I
chance.
think that we might have to find another Buckeye representative if we want to keep
We
that
got a
going.
couple of Buckeyes mutuals. We should be okay.
I do want to go back to something he said though, because he mentions teams that have continuity, teams that have a lot of upperclassmen in this era of transition, era of transfer portal. Obviously, much has been made about the $20 million roster that Ohio State's gotten out here. And obviously, there's some big-time contributors that they have. Will Howard, Caleb Downs, just to name a couple. But what would you guys say are the defining position groups for Ohio State?
Their receivers for sure. This year it was the running backs, and Quinshon Judkins was no small part of that. He was a big time transfer, and he made some huge plays tonight that really cost him. So,
Absolutely.
it was big time.
Absolutely, and they filled holes, and the broadcast did a good job of featuring how they pitched that to Travion Henderson. I think Holly Rowe had that.
Their linebacker core is pretty solid too. I mean, the
linebacker core. I would say defensive line and wide receivers though are the two defining position groups, and there's a plethora of upperclassmen and on the defensive line that have been there for years, and they have yet to take a transfer wide receiver under Brian Hartline. So it's a couple of position groups that they have just been loading up for years and years and years, and it finally paid off for them. So I think Ohio State is a great testament to years and years of stacking classes on classes on classes of high school recruiting, holding on to those guys in the era of the transfer portal, largely holding on to the most important ones at least, and cherry picking to fill your needs. We've talked time and time again on the show of, can you actually build a true national champion contender through the transfer portal? And we've seen a lot of teams try, but Ohio State has been just the model of excellence in cherry picking those big needs and getting those elite few players. They took 7 transfers last year, and 7 transfers was good enough for I just had it up on 247, the 9th best transfer class in the country. So they're prioritizing high quality over quantity and just plugging those holes that they need.
Well, and this is probably the biggest transfer national championship that we've had so far, because I mean, you think last year to Michigan, they didn't have a whole bunch of transfers. They had a lot of in-house guys just get developed. You think back to the Georgia teams, they get some of the best talent. I'm sure there were guys who transferred in, but a lot of their guys were homegrown and developed as well. And the quarterback was certainly homegrown and developed for those Georgia teams. You go back even further than that, Alabama, a bunch of those guys had been on the team. You go back further than that, LSU. Like the big note about LSU was how many passes they had thrown and completed between, Burrow and, Chase and all those guys. Like that was the note that was said about those teams. And so you look at really the I don't know, the last decade or so, it really hasn't been teams that have just completely overhauled with the portal. And I think that goes to show, like, yeah, there's something about culture. There's something about having guys on the roster and, like, yeah, you can fill a spot. Like, obviously, Ohio State fills the quarterback spot. But, and, they had the running back. And so, yeah, but most of that team, the other guys on that team, the 20 other starters, right, or the 19 other starters for them, that weren't just impact transfers. Those are guys that have been on the squad, have been doing stuff, have been, competing and contributing and developing that culture. There's something to that. And I'm honestly curious to see if we'll ever see one of those big time transfer teams ever break through on top and just what it would take, in terms of talent level for one of those transfer classes to get up over the top.
It's a good question, right? I mean, we saw with Florida State this year. You can live by the transfer portal and be a top 4 team, and you can die by the transfer portal and win 2 games.
And sign DJU as your quarterback.
Yeah, well, oh boy, they went to Thomas Castellanos for this next season, so batten down.
Oh, we're feeling fantastic in Knowles County.
So we talked a lot about Ohio State, rightfully so, right? They claimed the national championship, but I want to ask you guys about Notre Dame. A lot of folks didn't expect Notre Dame to be here, and we've cataloged that, but they found a way. They kept winning games. They won 13 in a row prior to losing 2 tonight. And, I made the point that I thought Marcus Freeman was a top 5 coach, the way that he had handled the season, the way that he was building a program. And that take may not look the rosiest right now, especially given some of those head-scratching decisions that he made kind of under the gun. There were a couple of times where I felt like, all right, the moment might have been a little too big for old Freeman there. But in general, the easy joke is that Notre Dame isn't going to be able to scale this summit, right? They got blasted by Alabama. Had Ohio State maybe kept the pedal down and not gone into cover 3 and cover 4 shells, maybe Notre Dame ends up getting boat raced in this one as well. But I tend to lean the other way. They've got to go find another quarterback. I'm not sure exactly what they're going to do at quarterback, if it's going to be CJ Carr, or I don't know if Angeli has another year of eligibility, but, QB1 is open, right? They're going to have to figure out what they're going to do at the wide receiver position as well. I think Bo Collins is out of eligibility. Chris Mitchell might be out of eligibility, but don't quote me on that. But they've got to find some more playmakers there, right?
Greathouse is a stud, but he can't get it done by himself.
Yeah, they've got to be able to stretch the field in a variety of ways. I believe that Mitchell Evans is gone, and that offensive line certainly needs to take a couple of steps forward to improve as well. So the question that I have for you guys is, do you expect Notre Dame to be on a similar stage in 2025, or are they going to take a step back? Where are you in their program building right now?
I mean, they have a lot of young talent on that defense that I think can lead them to a lot of victories. And we saw this year that they really don't need a ton to go their way to get a very favorable draw in the college football playoff. I'm pulling up their schedule next year right now, and it's definitely tougher than this year's. They still have Texas A&M. They go to Miami to open the season next year. They have other games against at Arkansas. They host Boise State. Obviously play their USC rivalry game that they play every single year. So there's a few opportunities to trip up, but even this schedule, man, on paper doesn't look like to be a murderer's row. I'm seriously questioning how many ranked teams they'll end up playing, just taking a quick glance at the schedule. So by virtue of their defense and by virtue of their schedule, I'm fully expecting them to be in the field next year again. And anything can happen, especially if they're hosting the first round game.
Trey, do they have a MAC team on the schedule? That's kind of a big question, I think.
That's a great question. They do not have a MAC team.
There we
go. The only G5 level teams
That's smart
that they're playing are Boise State and Navy. next year. Those are the only G5 teams that they're.
Well, does Boise make the jump to the pack? Does that count as power?
That's 2026, isn't
The
it?
26. I don't know when that happens. I don't know if that was.
Yeah, I think
It's
We're
kind
not
of a
in
tongue in
off-season
cheek,
mode
anyways.
yet.
Let's not act like the pack is a power conference anymore. Not like adding, if Boise jumps in, they might be the best team in the conference. But yeah, no, I'm personally pretty high on Notre Dame right now as a program, and I think it kind of goes back to some of what I was saying in our preview show, which is that the pressure from a program standpoint was really on, Ohio State to kind of get this done. And Ryan Day had all the pressure on him as the coach to kind of get this thing done. Right now, Marcus Freeman, like I said, whatever he does, right, whatever, if he wins or loses or if it's a blowout or whatever it is, it's not really going to affect his job security or where he is as a program. Like Notre Dame's trending in the right direction. They're clearly moving in the right direction. Now, it's going to be hard for them to get back to this stage because there's so many good teams, right? Because of the virtue of the 12-team playoff, it's hard to run the gauntlet, right? They're not always going to get Georgia without their quarterback, right? They're not always going to get a Georgia team that can't run the football. They're not always going to get a Penn State team that, forgets how to play offense for a half, right? They're not always going to get the benefit of some of these, good teams that they played, but it was somewhat favorable on their path to get here. So, I don't think that I'm worried about Notre Dame in terms of who they are. I don't think that this was like a TCU situation from a couple years ago where, you had a magic sort of, confluence of all these players coming together in just the right moment. And it would just kind of caught, lightning in a bottle. I don't think that's what this is for Notre Dame. In fact, I think you can make the argument that, with a little bit more of a prolific passing quarterback, this offense could ratchet up a notch. No disrespect to Riley Leonard as a quarterback. He's an absolute warrior, but maybe not always the most prolific passer, doesn't always have the arm talent to get the ball where it needs to be. So you get a guy who can pass the ball a little bit better and help stretch that out, make it a little bit more of a diverse offensive attack. I think Notre Dame could be a fantastic team going into next year. It's really just going to be about their draw. Do they get in at 10-2 could be a possibility, right? Trey's mentioned the schedule's a little bit tougher. If they drop to, Texas A&M or Miami or USC or any of those kind of tougher teams on the schedule, if they drop a couple of those, do they get in, right? Do they get in at 10-2? That's a whole other conversation about how the committee picks teams, right? But I don't think I'm worried about Notre Dame. It may not be next year that they're back here, and it may not be the year after that, but I do think that Notre Dame is going to be hanging around as a playoff team and will probably make some runs and end up back in a championship game pretty soon.
Notre Dame, just to close the loop on the wide receiver front, they got 3 blue chip wide receivers in the class last year. This year they have 1 and a tweener with Jerome Bettis Jr. I know some classify him as a blue chip and some don't. So anyway, the point being, they've got some help coming on the way. Some guys that I know they're really high on the class from last year. You dip into the portal again. Who knows what comes around in the spring. And I think Notre Dame, as long as they can keep their coordinators too, with Mike Denbrock, that offense looked so much more productive this year. I was thinking about this actually while watching the Commanders and the Lions game, because Sam Hartman is like the reserve quarterback on the Commanders roster, right? Sam was a much more prolific passer for Notre Dame, and yet they couldn't get anywhere close to the ceiling that they got this year with that offense. And I think part of that is the offensive coordinator, part of that's quarterback play. But you saw Denbrock get the absolute most out of Riley Leonard this year, and I believe he can do that again with whoever is their quarterback going forward into the future. And then Al Golden on the defensive end, he and Marcus Freeman are tremendous together. We'll see if Al Golden stays. I had seen some rumors that Golden might leave to take a job in the NFL, maybe the Cincinnati Bengals. We'll see. But anyway, the staff as it is right now, I think can get Notre Dame up to where they're competing for championships year in and year out.
And let's not forget Marcus Freeman is 39 years old.
It's true.
He's not even 40 years old yet. So he has a ton of bright years ahead of him. Shoot, Ryan Day is only 45 years old. I just saw the blurb on ESPN that he's now the youngest head coach since Urban Meyer in 2008 to win a national championship. So
hide your kids, hide your wife, hide your kids, hide your wife. That's what I got to say.
Well, yeah. So But Ryan Day, for all the flack that he's gotten over the years, is only 45 years old. He is still very much in his early years of coaching. We have a very interesting next few years coming up with all the coaches that are young and talented. Dan Lanning isn't 40. Kirby's not even 50 yet. And he's going to have Georgia back up sooner rather than later. So we have a ton of really exciting young coaches that are filling that generational gap with Saban retiring last year. So really excited about the future, not just these two programs, but just all of college football with the coaches that we have.
I'm with you there. I think that's a great point. No doubt about it. The future of this game is bright. Now, the flip side of it that we're not going to get into on this podcast, we're going to talk about the business side, the logistical side, orchestrating, organizing college football in general. That's all for our.
I'll see you guys later.
season.
Not talking about it right now.
wrapping up season 3, and I teased that we might get into some other things. I think it's 11 o'clock local time. We're almost an hour into this. I think we wrap the national championship pod. We save all this other discussion for the what did we learn podcast that we have coming later this week. And then guys, that'll put a bow on year 3 of the show, which is pretty cool. This will be our 269th episode, I believe.
Nice.
We did over 100 episodes this year alone. A lot of content that we put out. So, I mean, thank you to you guys for showing up and doing this little show with me a couple times a week. This has been a ton of fun to build and grow together. And yeah, I think this has been I think this game was a fitting end to the most entertaining season, certainly that we've covered together, and the most entertaining season that I can remember in well over a decade.
And thank you to Jimmy's and Joe's too. You guys make this a lot of fun for us, and we're excited to see what next year brings.
Yeah, man, we made awesome connections this year with a lot of other people in the space, and got to go get media credentialed to games and see. Look, we're riding high, man. 3 Tech is still on the way up, and so there might be certain programs up or down. There might be certain things we're optimistic about, maybe some money things that we're not quite so optimistic about. But it's a long and dark off season, unfortunately, which starts now. We get to enter that long and dark off season. So I guess if you're still watching, make sure you subscribe so you can get through it with us, right? We got to all band together, right? Hold it together for warmth until we get back to that week 0.
I've got a frightening amount of content that I'm really excited to get to. I've got all kinds of hypotheticals and planning and deep dives. We're going to talk college football all the way through the spring and summer until it's time for preview season again, which guys, as we write those and put out comprehensive videos like that, those come quicker than you might think. So we'll be to preview season before we know it. But I say let's wrap it there. Year 3 in the books. Ohio State, the national champion, 34-23 over Notre Dame. Again, I think just a really entertaining way to end this season. So for Trey Reeves and Garrett Turney, I'm Mitch Mason. To all the Jimmies and the Joes, thanks for 3 great years on the podcast. Until next time, we'll see you later.
Gracious him.